Welcome to the AI Revolution in Healthcare series. I'm one of your hosts, Carrie Purcell, joined by Jaspreet Chager. Jaspreet, let's start with some introductions. So tell everybody who you are and a little bit about your background, please.
For sure. First of all, thanks for having me, Carrie. So my background is unique. I'm actually a healthcare provider by profession. So for 20 years, I served in healthcare. I'm a pharmacist, and I served in supporting patient care for most of my career. Most of the expansions in healthcare that have happened in pharmacy have taken a lot for pharmacists to get used to, and my job has really been to support those individuals. So I've been really close to regulatory and all of those pieces. And in about 2023, when ChatGPT first came out, I was going through an interesting situation in my life. So getting a little personal here, but I was going through a separation, and at the same time, I was also supporting a lot of efforts related to COVID vaccines and the COVID in general. And I found myself, in a situation where I was, raising children and having to deal with work, and just didn't really know how to make it work. And I discovered ChatGPT and AI, and that's really where my journey kind of started. I really started focusing on how AI could support my life, and I streamlined pretty much everything from my work to my actual personal life. I was able to really figure out a lot of the legal issues as well that were part of my life due to my situation, my separation. And from that journey, I really kind of discovered the ability of AI to help a lot of women in my situation. So I'm not necessarily only talking about the healthcare side, but I'm really talking about just as a female and AI being able to support us. So that's kind of where the journey started. However, it quickly pivoted just because I saw the gaps in healthcare, and I saw that there really weren't that many resources related to AI and AI implementation in healthcare. And fast forward, that's where you and I kind of met and started our journey, Carrie, when we really started looking at how AI can support healthcare in general.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you for that background. So briefly, I'll just explain who I am. I do not come with a background in healthcare. I am a doctoral candidate in AI, focused on responsible and ethical AI, as well as AI adoption within small and medium-sized organizations specifically. I do some work with enterprise, which means that I do look across regulated industries like healthcare. But where this project became particularly interesting was being able to meet both Jaspreet and a whole series of other experts in a book project that we worked on called the AI Revolution. And from there, when we saw a lot of themes across healthcare, we realized that we really did have access to a network that could speak very knowledgeably about where we are today, where we're going in the future. And that gave us the unique opportunity to prepare this series. So hearing a little bit about where Jaspreet came from and her background, Jaspreet, tell us, the idea of pulling the series together really was yours. So tell us why it mattered and where it came from.
So in my work, my focus has always been the practitioner and looking at their personal liabilities associated with patient care. I recognized very early on from all my work that I had done over the years in the regulatory space that using AI without the proper consents in place and whatnot was going to be a concern in pharmacy and in healthcare in general. And what I started noticing was a lot of healthcare providers pivoting to using AI and desperately wanting to use AI, but not necessarily knowing the appropriate ways to use AI and how to use AI safely, especially with all the legislation and regulatory frameworks that exist in Canada. We really did see a gap there, especially last year and the year preceding that. We did see some gaps in being able to inform and educate healthcare providers on how to use AI properly. So that really was the impetus impetus for me to kind of really say, hey, I've been doing this my entire career, really trying to focus on the healthcare practitioner and really make sure that they know and they're equipped with the resources they need to really support patient care. And I felt that this was a huge gap. And, like, this isn't necessarily only related to my healthcare work. I do have a business where I support AI literacy and AI implementation, not just with females, but with, healthcare providers and SMEs as well. So yeah, it came back to, recognizing for 20 years, this was the work I did, seeing how significant resources and implementation support actually is in patient care, and seeing this huge delta was actually quite scary to me. And that really was the framework that really brought it forward.
Yeah, amazing. So lots of really important ground covered there. We are going to talk a little bit more about what has been happening and why this series mattered. Also, a little bit about what's coming. So there were some really clear topics that we knew we had to cover here, and because we are dealing with, there are themes that are going to come out of the conversations ahead that have a lot of optimism in them. A lot of experimentation, a lot of excitement, a lot of tools and methods that are proving and scoring really well, that are within healthcare and can be applied to healthcare. But we do have to take a pause in healthcare, looking at safety and looking at responsibility to say, can we use these today? How can we use these today? What are the safeguards we can put into place? So we do very intentionally talk about responsible AI as its own session. We then talk about responsible and ethical AI applied to healthcare. And we then look at what we call the future of AI in healthcare, which is always a really exciting way to think about things. But we will preface that this field is moving incredibly fast. And what was the future last week might be here next week. So Jaspreet and I will talk a little bit about that in this introduction as well. What has already changed and what do we see coming already since some of the conversations that we recorded here. So that's a bit about what's coming. As we look at that, so we're recording April 2026, and we're going to talk about how quickly things are moving. But Jaspreet, what have you seen? You went back a few years to you digging into AI becoming quite democratized across the general public. What have you seen that's changed in the last 2 or 3 years that made this topic urgent?
For sure. So I think even when we kind of started having the conversations, we were seeing people dabble. And I think the fear then was, are they dabbling incorrectly? And are we playing with patient information that could cause concerns in the future? Yeah. What I see now, fast forward, I have seen some regulatory bodies catch up and really kind of look at the importance of building frameworks so that if practitioners are going to decide to use AI tools, to really giving them concrete kind of frameworks and understanding, okay, where does your liability stand? I think, there are still gaps across the board, but I'm starting to see some of that guidance really kind of come in, and it's landing exactly where we would have expected. I'm also seeing that a lot of healthcare providers are actually taking that front seat and actually trying to just tinker with the tools and play with tools on the coding side, which is kind of interesting to see. And it makes actually a lot of intuitive sense that, that's where they would feel most comfortable, and just trying to play with the tools. They are the product experts. They really do understand how it can be used and how it can be used in their environment, because they understand their environment so well. So I'm seeing some of that happening. I'm actually seeing a lot of the right type of work happening as well. So I don't see as many people rushing out to market with AI tools as I did probably a couple of years ago. I do see people taking more informed kind of steps, really kind of figuring out, is this the best approach to really look at AI in healthcare? I think, sometimes we jump to AI in healthcare, but healthcare is embedded with so much rules and regs. Like, do you even need the AI necessarily, or just set up the structure with the rules and the regs? And, it kind of, those kind of automations might help as well. So I think there are a lot more informed conversations happening. And luckily, because we are seeing more guidance come from regulatory bodies, mind you, there are still gaps, I will say that, but I am seeing more and more so, the individuals that are responsible for providing the guidance stepping forward.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, and so that'll come up throughout the series, but again, we might be I think what we're talking about in this introduction is really that we might be further ahead than even some of the concerns that we had in those conversations. So you brought up the idea of a kind of privacy and confidentiality with patient information, right, is extremely important in healthcare. What happens? So you've also brought up the idea that we really do need those guidelines, right? Regulation isn't just something to slow down evolution or innovation. It really is something to help protect and help guide how to do this well, how to do this safely, how to do it properly. What happens, this is a general question, but kind of speak to the idea of what happens if we get it wrong.
Yeah, I mean, let's just take outside of healthcare, like if you look at some of, the examples we've seen where we don't have guardrails in place, we've seen companies kind of take back the reins from AI and show concern over AI just doing things on its own. Just it can get messy very, very quickly. And I don't think in healthcare we're at the point where we can say humans are not in the loop. And even speaking to the fact that, pharmacists or healthcare providers are playing with these tools, I think this just calls for more collaborative efforts. It's not about getting rid of any type of occupation or anything of that sort. I think software developers, software engineers, and healthcare providers need to work concurrently together to actually find the solutions in this space so that we don't get it wrong. I think the risk is so huge with patient data. At the colleges have basically all clearly said that the liability will lie with the healthcare provider in the end. And that's why my concern always goes to that practitioner and ensuring that they are informed with the tools that they're using. Even if your corporate office, for example, if you work somewhere where your corporate office has suggested that you need to use a tool, the impetus does fall on the regulated healthcare provider to ensure that they understand very clearly how that tool is working so they can explain it to a patient. And in the end, the liability will all fall on them.
Yeah. Okay. So really, really important points around responsibility, accountability, and the liability, right? The legal aspect of that. Of course, we are also dealing in a sector that has literally life and death decisions being made, and impacts on people's life and how well they can live it. Do you see areas where we are moving too fast or too slow?
Not now. I think now for interestingly enough, in the last couple of years, and I think since we started having these conversations, AI in general moves really fast, and I think it's kind of forced industries to move quickly with it, at least when it comes to saying, okay, we need to put the brakes on, or we need to really kind of consider the rules and the regs kind of surrounding this. So I think last year when we had kind of started this series, my thought was that, a lot of people were focusing more on the clinical aspects and not as much on the administrative aspects that can really streamline their lives. But I've actually seen that grow quite a bit. I've seen, documentation support grow quite a bit. Scribes, like that kind of stuff has really grown in the last year. So I think movement is being made, and I kind of touched on this, that it's going to happen naturally because there's going to be no choice. This train is coming way too fast, and everybody just kind of has to jump up on board, whether or not they like it, at least to establish those guardrails and rules that will kind of inform conduct in the future.
Yeah, that's fair to say. And then just going back to your point about the healthcare providers, the practitioners who are themselves regulated, that they do carry that liability. We're seeing since recording some of the conversations in this series, the rise and access of, for example, agentic AI has really grown. It was a promise that, to be honest, was overhyped early on. But now it really is here. And with that comes the conversation around how autonomous should they be, and at what point is the human really not only making decisions, but approving what AI agents are doing. And I think what we're saying here is in healthcare, the human absolutely is making decisions and approving, right? We really aren't, and we can open the conversation up more broadly, but we really are not at the point of implementing autonomous agents or autonomous tools broadly in healthcare at all, even though they may be here in the background. They may be something that we are paying attention to or using in some capacity, but that human ownership and that human decision making is still paramount, is still the focus.
For sure. I think there's also, I think I kind of touched on it, the risk of it is such a powerful tool that you almost, anybody, any kind of professional would think to themselves that I can kind of do this on my own. And that's where I touched on the fact that I really don't think that that's the answer. And I think that a lot of it lies in just collaboration, not only with other healthcare providers, but really, actually with the developers, with software developers, to really kind of figure out what this looks like, because it's very easy to sit in front of, an AI tool and just program and code and think how to do everything, but you really there are so many gaps there, and I think in healthcare it's especially important.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have a diverse set of perspectives in the rest of this series. So we are a ground of bringing researchers together, bringing physicians together, bringing pharmacists together, bringing people that focus more on the responsible, ethical, and governance aspects into the same conversation, into the same room. And we do need to see that happening. We talk about that in some of our sessions as well, right? That as we're looking at tool development, as we're looking at process innovation and implementation, that needs to continue. We do need all of those different voices coming in to do this properly, to consider all of the different aspects, and to put the patient at the center as well.
Yeah, for sure. I think it'll just make that is the mechanism to actually make this work in the future and to make it much more better for the patient and healthcare providers alike. That is the mechanism for sure. So
a couple more questions before we jump into the rest of the series. Where is AI working today in healthcare?
Oh, so many places. I think, in Canada for sure, we saw like a huge movement with AI scribes. So there's a whole project related to that. I think in the series as well, we touched on some of the stuff that the institutions are really looking at. Anecdotally, I know even from just talking to people in pharmacy, there's a lot more conversation just happening in general in healthcare, like a lot more presentations to this effect, a lot more sharing of literacy just in general, so healthcare providers understand what the impacts of actually using these tools and the due diligence that's needed to use the actual tools. So I'm seeing a lot of that type of movement as well right now.
Amazing. I'd like to go on. I like to look at both sides. So is there anything that you see today that's failing?
I think it's what I really touched on. I think the risk really, and I think it's not only for healthcare, but healthcare being highly regulated, it is a pressing concern. And it's just that, that it is so powerful, AI, that and it keeps on getting better and better and better. And in other industries, people are shipping products without, having the proper teams in place. And I think that is the biggest risk for healthcare. Having tools that all of a sudden don't have the proper infrastructure really in it, and people just being so, I talk to healthcare providers all the time who desperately want solutions. However, we do need to follow the right processes, and that's the conversation I'm having with them, that you need to follow the right processes. Somebody else, and I know they exist, can intervene and just say, let's do it, let's get it done. I think you risk then bypassing some fundamental regulatory pieces when you do that. So I think that's where the biggest risks are, is, it's not that it's overconfidence, and I get it. It's empowerment. It's just for the first time, healthcare providers can build on their own, but I really do think you need that software side to it. I think it's very premature to think that we can completely eliminate those types of conversations.
Yeah. So from the point of view of healthcare leaders, what should they be doing in the next 12 months?
I think healthcare, for sure, they should be looking at their AI governance strategy. I think I haven't heard too much about AI governance in general at most organizations. I think at least at minimum that I think going back to last year, I think that was a conversation we had last year, and I don't think that has pivoted or changed too much. So although I think there are more presentations and more discussions on due diligence and whatnot, I don't think that enough companies have really looked at creating their own governance strategies. And I think that's probably the first place to start.
Yeah, that's excellent, right? I think conversations around, to your point, experimentation, right? What feels like it's at our fingertips that we can maybe create by ourselves is happening. I think there may be conversations around AI strategy that are happening more today than they were. And I don't know that people are at the point of really having those AI governance conversations and how important it really is. We're looking outside saying regulation is lagging in Canada. Some places it's lagging worse, some places it's a little bit ahead. But from our point of view here in Canada, we're saying we don't have enough of that guidance and enough of those guardrails in place for what we need. But if and when we do, we really do still have to look internally at the individual cases, the individual organizations, who the clients and patients are, to say, okay, how are we doing this responsibly, and reducing the risk of the liability piece as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I still think there's a huge gap in people understanding that they are personally liable as well, especially healthcare providers. I think I think that is a huge delta. And I think organizations setting up a governance strategy that will trickle down to really just kind of inform practitioners as well.
Yeah. So let's take the other side, like the general public and the patients. What do they need to understand, and what should they be questioning themselves?
Well, I think, patients should know that it is their right in terms of whether or not they want to share their own data if AI is going to be involved, and healthcare providers should be seeking consent for sure, and it is explicit consent, so that they understand that the AI could be used for training purposes or whatnot, or whatever the company is using it for. So I think that should be very clear to patients. I have rarely, I will say, seen that actually exist in practice.
Yeah. I think that's a really, really important one to pause on and to put out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I have seen it at certain practitioners. I think vets are great for it. I think every single time I go into my vet, they let me know that they're going to be using an AI scribe. Yeah. I'm not so sure how many other practitioners are actually informing us right now.
Yeah, I've experienced that at the vet over the last several months as well, and I'm a combination of sort of excited, but also literally the entire conversation is being recorded. So be aware and be considerate of the the potential implications of that. For sure. Yeah. For sure. All right, so we have a lot of great content ahead. Jaspreet, who is this series really for, and what are they going to find?
Well, for sure, I think for healthcare providers, any provider, wherever you work in Canada or even abroad, I think there's myself, there's other healthcare providers as well who are quite passionate about the use of AI in healthcare, but also passionate about using it properly so that there's no risks involved for both yourself and for patients. I also think that, the organizations that support patient care in any kind of form, I think should be, whether or not it is directly hiring healthcare providers or just, in some way that if you touch patient care, I think you should be informed and watch the series to really see what kind of, I think, especially from that governance perspective, to really understand how to set up governance strategies and set up your AI strategy in general, but really starting with that governance piece.
Yeah. Thank you for emphasizing it again. It really is central to what this conversation has to be, and it will be central to the conversations throughout our series. So you'll encounter 3 panels, one that talks about responsible AI generally, one that talks about responsible and ethical AI applied to healthcare. And in that specific panel, we do have a doctor. We do have a research hub that's involved. So we have AI researchers. We do have entrepreneurs, business owners that are actually out there putting forward what they've worked on with research hubs. We have pharmacists represented, and then we move into for panels, the future of AI. And in between those panels, you're also going to get individual interviews. So we're going to learn more about each of those experts that you're going to hear, what their role is, what their experience is, what they're doing today with healthcare, with AI in healthcare. Jaspreet, we didn't do this just to, just to emphasize regulation, which is central, which is important, that governance piece. We didn't do it just to share some cool ideas. Tell me what gives you hope in this conversation and this series.
Well, I think at the core of it, I think I can't take the healthcare provider out of me. And all I want in the world is for people to be educated and feel empowered. I think the journey really started for me with female empowerment and recognizing how AI improved my personal life. And I also saw a lot of female healthcare providers struggle because they were balancing both their personal lives, especially at a time of COVID, and their work. And I saw a huge opportunity for AI to really simplify their lives and really, really empower them. So that's where the journey kind of started for me. And I am super excited about the future with AI and how it can improve patient care and how it can improve the lives of healthcare providers who are drowning in administrative burdens. So a lot of excitement for where the future is headed with AI, with the caveat that, we need to pay attention to the regs and the regulators really need to come out and inform the practitioners so they can better support patient care.
Amazing.
I just really wanted to touch on, because I don't think I had touched on it before, the whole piece about developing without software. I'm just seeing it happen so much right now. I'm just so concerned about where that will head, because we're basically develop all day long now. But I have engineers that are checking everything that I do, because there's no way I'm going to ship anything out there without, especially in healthcare. Mm-hmm. But I am seeing, and it's a concern that we have even where I work on a daily basis, is that pharmacists will just jump into the seat and say, okay, that's it, I'm building it myself, because we're so desperate. It is still it's so bad, in terms of having software that can support us, that pharmacists are going to jump in and just saying, we'll build it ourselves. And then we're going to have a huge situation with people who are not necessarily competent in the space, but who believe they are. Last year, it wasn't as evident to me that the solution is collaboration with developers. I don't think I even touched on that last year, but this year for sure.
Yeah.
That's what I'm seeing quite a bit of.
Yeah, it is really important now. And I don't think we may have talked about it generally, we might have alluded to it without knowing that was the kind of collaboration we were actually going to see needed, right? Just months, kind of around evolved. The corner.
Yeah, it just kind of evolved this year, where it's very even the software engineers I work with are kind of recognizing that that's the shift. The shift has become that the product people are going to develop and then they're going to review. That's going to be the primary job now. Yeah, it has become not to not to belittle any of the work that you're doing, because I'm not in it and I'm not here to do that. But it has become so easy to prototype things. But I think what people are potentially unaware of is that aside from safety concerns, which are real, it probably is not scalable. It probably is not built with any. Yeah, that's my fear. Yeah, that's my fear. So that's why I definitely don't think engineers or anyone can be taken out of the loop. I think the answer, and I think a lot of the answers actually lie in collaboration, where I think a lot of people in AI kind of feel the $1 billion entrepreneur, right? That solopreneur. That's what they're all thinking.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
But I don't know that's the answer.
Well, I mean, it probably isn't, because all of the major developers out there just continually expand their teams and hire, right? So if it had been cracked, we would be seeing it by example. But I I like your kind of definition around the new role for the developer, right? So maybe they aren't like maybe they aren't the first pass, and maybe they aren't hands-on in that capacity to begin with, but that they really do have a super important role. And
well, I will say that they actually do have a role in setting up your environments as well. Like, I think they're key for initial, like, you get them to set up your entire environment for you. So, and they give the rules to the CloudMD files and all of that. Then, people like me go in and code, and then they review the code. I think that is the actual new way of coding, and for at least until a new big development comes out.
For this month, for this quarter.
Exactly.
Okay, so that does bring up another important question, which is, so we do talk in the series about the tension between innovation and regulation, right? So regulation is incredibly important for us to actually scale, right? Without it, we are not only going to make mistakes, and probably pretty bad ones, but we're going to hit bottlenecks, right? That's the reality. Is like once you have that clear path with those clear guardrails, you can move quickly. Without it, you can't. So with that in mind, how, and us kind of joking around, well, it's true this month or this quarter, like how do we look forward quarter over quarter, month over month, with organizational planning and strategy, right? How do we build in these opportunities to continually reassess, or when do we have to reassess what we're using, what's available, what our governance looks like? How do we keep up?
Good question. I will say anecdotally, like, just because we speak about this constantly, and what we're noticing is that there are like ongoing reviews. There are like literally people on teams that are constantly reviewing what is coming out, what is out there. Is there a need to pivot to another model this month? Like, I mean, it just, even this week, Claude 4.7 came out and we were using 4.6. So it's like automatically, do we pivot? What do we do? So I think there has to be, which is like, it's a unique type of role. I think we've never really seen this before, or maybe we haven't. I'm just not familiar with these types of roles, but it's really individuals on teams that are constantly reviewing new stuff, because there's also a risk of that, the shiny toy syndrome, and which is huge in AI, right? Because there's new tools coming out all the time, and all you want to do is pivot. Like Claude Design came out this week, and everybody's super excited. But for those who are already like deeply embedded in building tools, or already have like their design, what does that mean? Like, what does that actually mean? So there has to be resources on teams that don't fall into that trap of the tiny toy syndrome, and just get super excited about every new thing that comes out, and really be able to evaluate the models and evaluate what actually has been used, and see whether or not that has value for a company. And that still then all comes down to governance, because that's really kind of what defines your priorities and what kind of things you'd actually be looking at for the future as well, right?
Yeah, I completely agree. It's such an interesting one, because, I mean, you bring up like Claude Design as we would this week in time. And I teach in, one of the biggest colleges in Toronto, in the School of Design, where I guess I won't name software in particular, but there's other major competing software that they're not going to stop using this month, and they're probably not going to stop using next year, right? So there is that review is important, the continual updates and releases, and often we do have some sense of what's coming, right? We have maybe something's leaked, maybe something is publicly advertised, right? So we know things are coming. We know how it could evolve and what's blocking it, and sometimes when that block is moved, right? So we know that it could be coming. But when we look back, we realize there are only actually every quarter, every 6 months, a couple of major changes that have an impact, and even then, mass adoption of those hasn't happened. Right. So the sense that we're behind and we can't keep up isn't actually the majority perspective. Like, that isn't, people feel behind. I hear it every day from every perspective. But they actually aren't that far behind. A lot of the changes that have happened that would be monumental enough that they should consider adopting it we're not at the point where they are actually adopting it yet, or do actually need to, right? The industry hasn't changed to that point. The technology in some cases maybe hasn't been tested to the degree that we're really ready to do it either. And I think there should be some comfort in that as we look at, within the framing of tension between regulation and innovation. I mean, innovation is happening faster than we can regulate it, but the actual adoption and implementation organizationally and in regulated sectors like healthcare isn't happening as quickly as it might feel like, or as quickly as it might look like it could be happening. And there is comfort in that we really do need to take a breath. We need to take a pause. We need to look at systematically, okay, why would I make a change, right? What's available that's enough that I should be making a change today, or I should be considering it? And what's the structure within which that I can consider doing that with all the checks and balances in place?
Mm-hmm. I actually think, it's interesting because, on that note of people feeling like they've fallen behind, I was training a couple of people this past week, and I recognized how much easier it was actually to train just recently, just because of all the new tools that are actually out there. So I think, some of the major players have done a really good job of consolidating a lot of tools that we used to find separately in a lot of different platforms into one platform. And I actually think it's actually made it so much easier from a user perspective to use a lot more tools now. Like if you look at even Claude and like Anthropic and how far they've come in the last year, last year you're training people and you're talking about automations, you're going externally to other tools and arguably so much more complex. And this year, it's much more simplistic. So I think, anybody who was feeling like they're behind, I think the actual vendors, I think the individuals, like the companies that are really kind of shaping this space have done a really good job from a user perspective of over the years, just streamlining things to make it a lot easier. With saying that, though, it becomes so much easier that it does in the healthcare space and highly regulated spaces, it does get more risky to make errors, but at the same time, that barrier isn't really there, I find, anymore. And I find training is a lot easier in general just because of the progress that these companies have made themselves.
Yeah, which is important, and it's interesting, right, to see because that's a maturity of those tools, of those companies and their offerings, to the degree that it is going to make it, it is removing a barrier, right? It is going to make it a lot easier to adopt. So really, when we look broadly at so we know there's a lot of testing, we know there's a lot of shadow usage, but when we look broadly at adoption metrics across all organizational sizes and all regions, they're, I would say, shockingly low. I would say they're a lot lower than people think they are. And these, like that design, that user experience, are some of the shifts that we would need to see for those numbers to change. Because even, adoption isn't the same as usage, right? When organizations put a lot of effort into really assessing and spending and adopting, that doesn't mean that people know how to use it. It doesn't mean that they're trained. It doesn't mean they have confidence. It doesn't mean that they actually will, or that they have best practices, that they have room for continual learning and sharing.
That is interesting that the uptake is still so low despite organizations supporting it. I wonder, Carrie, if any of that is actually is supported by a fear of what AI would mean if they were to readily adopt it. Is there any concerns related to that?
So there are a number of barriers and there are a number of enablers, and they do change again across sectors and across organizational settings. So small and medium-sized businesses have different barriers than large enterprise. Large enterprise often have advantages around budgets, for example, that smaller businesses may not have, right? They can't take as many risks. They don't have as much budget to put toward it. But across the board, that actual usage, that actual interest in employee usage has had a significant overtone of concern over job loss, right? Like, what does my job look like if this can do so much? Now, I've seen a shift, and I don't know if I can support it in data yet today, April 2026, but I've seen a shift in output and productivity, which we could have said and anticipated a year ago, but I wouldn't have said it with the the anecdotal and gut, which I do think will be supported by large data soon. We really do have a significant amount of productivity gains and output that individuals can do that I think will help them realize job loss isn't the major concern with AI adoption, right? That really you will be able to produce so much more, that you will be as busy as you always were, you will be as valuable to the organization, and you really can create additional value because of that. But there is still that uncertainty and that unknown of how is it going to reshape my position? What are the expectations around it, right? How am I being judged? How am I using it? Who's supporting me in understanding how to use it? How's it being measured and documented? A lot of that really isn't clear in organizations yet. And when that piece is that idea that if we had that governance and we had those guardrails, we could run, as opposed to, sprinting and then taking a big break.
Uptake and people really embracing these tools, the answer really lies in governance. Because I was going to say that I think that a lot of that would come from employers then to support their employees, to know that, the intent isn't to get rid of jobs necessarily, but to really augment. And I think that's what a lot of people are looking for, is augmentation of roles. And I think there's a lot of evidence that's coming out where, people did fire entire teams where they're having to rehire them back. Yeah. So, and we've talked about it over and over, that the answer likely doesn't lie in job losses. It's a new norm that we're probably establishing, right?
Yeah, I do agree. I will say that I don't think that's being echoed particularly at the enterprise level right now. I think there is an idea of efficiency gains, of budget reallocation to AI and to tools, as opposed to their current resourcing budgets. I'm not sure that I've seen enough consideration to do that well, what the new roles would include, right? All of the new roles that would have to be created in order to support that AI adoption. And so that piece, I think, needs more definition around it. Yeah.
Yeah,
but that's why it becomes interesting.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's where the answers probably lie, right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. We look at the new role of the developer. We look at the new capacity that an individual has, and we start to say, okay, who do we need to support this? What do those roles actually look like and actually do in the future?
Yeah, like even if you just take me, for example, like who would have ever thought, right? Like that I would be actively developing anything, at any point in my life. I'm a healthcare provider by profession, and that's my training, right? So, but in collaboration with developers, it's possible. So again, it is just reinventing roles, and we probably have a ways to go, but hopefully we figure it out.
I hope we do figure it out. I think that all of the voices that we'll hear ahead in this series are actively working to figure it out, and I think there are a lot of answers actually that they each have and bring to the table as well.
For sure, absolutely.
Well, again, we're your hosts for this series, Jaspreet Chager and Carrie Purcell. We hope you enjoy all of the content ahead and keep listening.